All right, so to continue our discussion from the last video, let's actually look at some of the portrait shots. And here, I've deliberately taken shots that I have clicked where things kind of went wrong. It was not really a perfect portrait. And those 5 points will enable you to understand what exactly went wrong. And ultimately, when we start shooting in this course, you'll start to understand what are the things that we will be focusing on in order to improve our portraits. For example, let's take this shot. Okay, here I was doing this portrait shot late into the evening. You can see the surroundings. It was pretty dark, and I'm using one flash. Okay, so it's an off-camera flash, and I was just trying to light this model up with that flash. But the problem was I underestimated the amount of light that will be required to light her up properly. And what has happened here is if I zoom in, when it's zoomed out, it looks perfectly fine. It doesn't really look bad at all. We've got a nice bokeh, which we've got because of the gear that I was using, the camera gear, because I was using a 7200 f2.8 lens. So we've got a nice blur or a bokeh at f2.8, but because I was shooting under less light, I probably did not have another off-camera flash with me. If I zoom in, what you're going to see is that we have a lot of noise here. Okay, if I had another flash with me that time, I could have compensated the ISO because I would have had more light. But here, because I had less light, I really had to bump up my ISO, which you already must be knowing leads to noise. So just making a point here. Remember, one of the points was gear. If you do not have the correct gear, if you do not anticipate the correct gear required, it can definitely impact your shot in a big way. Similarly, let's look at another portrait. All right, so this is another portrait which is totally different from the portrait that we saw, which was shot outdoors. This is an indoor studio kind of a portrait. So here, of course, I had my studio lights. The lens, the camera wasn't that important because I'm not trying to generate a blur in the background, nothing. There's just a black background behind her, okay? But here, now this is a different kind of shot. Here, you need to focus on the other things. Remember the ambience. So that becomes very important. Like I had to kind of search for a sofa like this, which was, you know, really giving a good contrast between the dress that she was wearing, like this dark blue dress, and suddenly we have a lighter color here. Then, of course, we had to really work with the model, to figure out what kind of costume this time will look good on her, what kind of a pose will look good on her. See, we wanted to go for a really elegant looking pose, okay, and like a really classy kind of a shot. And we achieved that. But here you can see, instead of gear, my focus completely was on the ambience and the model, which were the fourth and the third points that we saw. So what I'm trying to just convey here is each portrait will probably give different weightage to the points that we saw. And ultimately in this course, my job is to teach you things in this way that anytime you have an idea of a portrait in your mind, you will be immediately able to understand which points you have to focus more on. But ultimately, you will find out that all those 5 points will be required in order to get a good portrait. For example, here, yes, the studio light is also part of gear, so that is important. The model is important. The ambience is important. The editing and the post-processing was very important in order to just smoothen out the skins and remove any sort of blemishes. So all this will go hand in hand. Let's look at one more portrait. All right, so this is another portrait which I really like, and if you have done my off-camera flash for beginners course, you will immediately recognize this shot because this was from a shoot that I show you in that shot, the complete A to Z shoot that we do here. But here, I'm using 2 flashes. And because of that, if I zoom in, I don't have that problem of the noise. So this time my gear was good enough to get this shot. We really spent a lot of time to get the ambience correct because I wanted this natural surrounding here. We wanted this dramatic look, so the flash was required. And because we chose a nice surrounding here and I used the flash, I could get the background exposure like this, like really dramatic. And that happens when you use an off-camera flash, which I'll talk about when we ultimately start shooting our portrait. And you can see this is also processed because I use dodge and burn and frequency separation in Photoshop in order to smoothen her skin here. So you can see again, all the things, and I remember we spent a lot of time discussing with this model what will be the outfit which will go well with such a surrounding and when we're going for a dramatic portrait, and we chose this jacket and I think overall this shot came out to be fantastic. Again, this is a portrait which I really like. I was doing a shoot for this baby, and one of the shots that the client asked me, which was her mom here, was she had this thing in mind where she slightly wanted to come blurred behind, and the focus should be on her son. Okay, so of course here, my main job, apart from having my studio equipment and lighting, was that I was using a lens which allowed me to just make my aperture wider so that when I focus on this and I'm using a wider aperture, she just goes slightly blurred here. So you can see here the gear played an important part. Now this is a portrait in which one of the things that we've been missing out, I've not really talked too much about this, is the settings, okay? Because that can have a huge impact, as you can see in this shot. What I did not anticipate in this shot is that we might be requiring a creative shot like this, and when this particular subject, she asked me that she had seen a shot like this, she showed me something on Google, and we tried to replicate it, and you can kind of guess where the problem came in this shot. It was mainly caused by the setting, because in order to get this, I had to bump my shutter speed or make it faster, use a faster shutter speed. That, if you know, cuts down the light that comes in the camera. Therefore, I had to bump my ISO up, and you can immediately see if I zoom in, we have got noise. So probably the shot would be more suited either in a time when the light was more, so the ambience comes into play, or the gear comes into play that I could have used off-camera flash. Okay, let's look at just one more portrait. Finally, I just wanted to show you this funny portrait of yours truly, where you can see the impact, and this is not really a portrait, I mean, I just clicked a selfie in my room, but you can see the impact that gear can have, because here I'm actually taking a portrait with a completely wide-angle lens, which is almost a sin in portrait photography, because it's going to completely distort your face, and you will look, your subject will look comical like this. But I just thought I'll put this shot in for the laugh, but it does make a point, which is that the lens that you use, which is a part of your gear, will play a big part. So I'm just trying to make you understand how are we going to approach this course. In the next video, I'm exactly going to tell you the approach that we're going to take, because what we're going to be doing in this course is we are actually going to go from level 1 to level 2 to level 3, where we will keep on improving our stuff and adding more things to those points that we discussed. And every time we move from one level to the above, we will change something in the portrait which makes it better. You'll understand this when I explain you this in the next video.